What's the worst way to die? Everyone has their answer. Maybe you're afraid of drowning or setting on fire or being buried alive. But John Jones probably never predicted the terrible way he would die. But who was he? What mistakes did he make that eventually led to his tragic death? And more importantly, what exactly happened to him? Let's take a closer look at this terrifying story of John Jones and the Nutty Putty Cave. John Edward Jones was born into a huge and loving family and grew up to be a very responsible, kind person. At the time of his accident, he was 26 years old. He was already married and had a 1-year-old daughter who he totally adored. His wife was also expecting their second child. Everyone said he was a very devoted father and husband, but he was devoted to something else too. He was working hard at medical school to train as a cardiologist specializing in saving the lives of children. John had grown up exploring caves as a spelunker with his dad and brother. When he was younger, he'd even volunteered to help the Utah Cave Rescue, an organization founded by his dad. His job was to act as a trapped victim in a cave to help them learn how to rescue people. Nobody knew at the time, but this was a dark foreshadowing of his tragic future. With all that experience, nobody expected anything to go wrong when they visited Nutty Putty Cave. But John hadn't been spelunking in the last few years, and he'd grown up a lot since he used to enjoy that activity as a kid. He was now 6 foot tall and about 200 pounds. Also, Nutty Putty Cave was no joke. Located in Utah, it was first discovered in 1960 and quickly became a huge attraction. It was named after the slippery, soft clay found inside its 1,400 feet of chutes and tunnels. Many of its passages are incredibly narrow, and people had gotten into trouble inside it before. 2 cavers and 2 Boy Scouts had got stuck in the past on different occasions, requiring rescuers to save them. Luckily, all of them were saved. In 2006, authorities started to worry about the safety of the cave and did some investigations. It turned out it was getting over 5,000 visitors every day, and all the foot traffic was wearing away at the rock inside. This was a particular problem at one of the cave's most popular attractions, a 45-degree room called the Big Slide. The rock in that area was now so smooth thanks to all the people walking on it that the investigators were sure there'd be a death soon. As if it wasn't dangerous enough, they also discovered that most visitors were arriving at the cave late at night and they weren't equipped with the correct safety precautions. As a result of those discoveries, the cave was closed from the public with a gate in 2006, but in 2009 it was opened again when new management took charge of it. They required a proper application to enter the cave to make sure everyone going in had taken the right safety precautions. This was when John and his family decided to visit. Just a few days before Thanksgiving, the Jones family all got together to celebrate. John and his younger brother Josh were probably remembering all the caves they visited as kids and wanted to relive their childhood. They picked Nutty Putty Cave as the perfect spot to explore. They weren't alone. 9 other friends had gone with them on their adventure. With so many people around, what could go wrong? They all explored the largest room in the cave before the 2 brothers and another 2 of their friends decided to go deeper into the darkness. They were looking for another one of the cave's main attractions, a narrow tunnel called the Birth Canal. The infamous passageway was known for being a serious challenge. It's a short but seriously narrow squeeze that leads to a larger space deeper in the cave. They set off to look for the Birth Canal, and John was the first to find it. At least, that's what he thought. He excitedly entered the tiny tunnel, not realizing that the hole he'd crawled into wasn't the famous Birth Canal. The spot he'd picked was a totally different feature, and crucially, this one didn't lead to a bigger room on the other side. John had no idea about the danger he was in. He'd accidentally crawled into the same tunnel where the 2 Boy Scouts nearly lost their lives years earlier. He was still looking for the big space at the end of the tunnel. A little way in, he realized this tunnel was a bit tight for him. But by that time, he was being squeezed too tight to turn back. He had to keep pushing forward. But he wasn't too worried about that because he was still expecting to find a comfortably big space at the end. He was now 50 feet in, and the tunnel was insanely small now, only 25 by 18 inches. He pushed forward once more. It was a terrible mistake. He'd pushed himself into a crack in the cave that was nearly totally vertical. Now, John was stuck almost completely upside down, with only his feet visible to anyone else. With his body in that position, there was no way he could reverse back out. His brother was following close behind and realized there was a problem pretty quick. He tried to pull John out himself, but the moment he let him go, John slipped back down to the position he was before. He couldn't help his brother pull either. His arm was pinned under his chest, and the other one stuck fast behind his back. there was nothing either of them could do. Josh immediately went to get help. The first rescuer at the scene was Susan. By the time she got the call and driven over, John had already been stuck for 3 hours. Susan wriggled through the cave quickly to find him, but there was nothing she could do on her own. Within hours, a whole group of rescuers had arrived past midnight to save John. But this wasn't a simple operation. They first had to work out how to get John out. Their first attempt to rescue him failed, and they had to start quickly on a new plan. They settled on a pulley system with ropes attached to John's legs, which they would hope helped pull him out. While they were setting it up, they also went in to try and drill enough of the rock away to help wiggle John free. But with the rock pressed so tightly against John's body, this was a pretty painful process. They didn't get far. Over an hour later, they'd only drilled through a few inches. John was still stuck fast. But being stuck wasn't his only problem. Because he was also mainly upside down, his body was facing a pretty serious problem. See, in normal life, gravity helps to circulate blood out of our brain so it can be replaced by fresh, oxygen-rich blood. But John was stuck upside down. This means that John's heart was having to work extra hard to pump blood back out of his brain while gravity was forcing it back into his head. This can put serious strain on our heart and cause problems in the brain, even for a young, fit man like John. Rescuers were working against the clock to get John out of the cave before it was too late. It wasn't easy to work fast though. Even with a team of well-equipped rescuers, the tunnel John was trapped in was so narrow that only one person could make contact with John at any one time, and they had to inch through 50 feet to get there. They were working hard to set up pulleys and securing them by drilling bolts into the rock, but they couldn't work any faster if they tried. John was given a radio to speak to his wife, but even though she was there to comfort him, he had now been stuck upside down for a shocking 19 hours straight, and he was having difficulty breathing. Thankfully, they'd achieved their huge task of installing the rescue system. They could finally start pulling John out. With 8 of them all tugging on the rope that was meant to save his life, John was obviously in a lot of pain, so they were taking breaks in between pulls. But it was working. Every tug got him a few inches further out. After the 3rd pull, John could make eye contact with the rescuer at his feet. The rescuer saw that, and even though John was complaining about the pain, he still had a smile on his face. They had almost done it. They went for a 4th pull. But then everything turned to chaos. The rescuer felt something hard hit his head and he passed out as the rest of the team fell backwards. The rope had suddenly gone loose. When the rescuer came to, he realized that one of the pulleys had fallen out. They think this might have been because of the clay that the cave was named after. He couldn't see John anymore. He realized that John had fallen even deeper into the crack and wasn't responding. The rescuer was badly injured now and was replaced as quickly as possible by another member of the rescue team. He tried to talk to John but got no answer. He could hear John was still breathing, but it didn't sound good. Desperate, the rescuer tried to climb down to the crack to attach a rope to John's torso, but he almost got stuck too. He freed himself and then quickly drilled a new hole for a pulley before another rescuer replaced the now exhausted man. The next rescuer couldn't hear John and was forced to crawl back out to make way for a medical professional. When the doctor finally crawled through the tunnel to where John was, he was forced to bring back the worst possible news. Despite 137 rescuers working for a solid 27 hours to save John, they hadn't been successful. The doctor pronounced John dead at midnight. The next day, authorities had to make another difficult call. They determined it was just too difficult and dangerous to get John's body out of the cave. Instead of risking more lives, they brought in explosives to collapse the tunnel near John's body. A week later, the entrance to the cave was sealed with concrete so no one would ever be able to enter it again. John's natural grave is marked with a plaque in his honor, near where the entrance used to be. Hopefully, the closure means nobody will ever suffer the same fate as John inside Nutty Putty Cave. What do you think about this tragic story? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.